Hi everyone, my name is Melissa. If you are subscribed to the Enterprise DNA channel, you'll probably notice that I already did a video on this topic, but the requirement changed. So instead of transforming a single file, we now have to transform multiple files from a folder. So let's take a look. Now this is the typical layout of the files. So you have the days set out horizontally and the weeks set out vertically. Now from file to file, the number of rows in each week of course can differ. It won't make any sense to expect more days in the week, right? So especially the variation in the number of rows, that will pose another problem that we have to solve. So let's go over to PowerQuery. And we're going to get the files from folders. So select New Source, More, in the All section, Folder, and press Connect. I created a parameter, so I'm going to select my parameter here and press OK. And it's going to show me the files that I have in that folder. At the moment there are only 2 files in that folder, and I get 3 options down below. I can stop what I'm doing, I can only transform the data, or I can combine and transform the data. Now that is what we want to do, because we want all the files from that folder and all get them together in a single result query. Okay, so I'm going to press Combine and Transform Data. Now it's going to ask you for the sample file, so you can choose any file in the folder to serve as an example. I'm just going to switch it so you see that that is allowed, and you can check what item you want to start from that folder, and that's our table 1. So I'm going to select that as well and press OK. Now it's not only going to load the data, but it also is going to create a bunch of other stuff, as you can see right here. So Combine and Transform created this folder with all these queries in them, and this query number 1. Now if we look at query number 1, we can see that this is the output file, so to speak. So this holds the data from both files 1 and 2 from my folder. However, this is not how we want to have this data. We want this data back into a tabular format. And that is where our transform sample comes in. So if we change transform sample, this query, if we change that to a tabular format, then that will serve as a blueprint for all the other files in that folder. So we're going to change this. We're going to add some steps to this query. So let's begin. The first 2 rows we don't need. So on the Home tab, we'll go to Remove Rows, Remove Top Rows, enter the first 2 and press OK. Now we also don't need column 1. Now I like to use Choose Columns. Deselect column 1 and press OK. And I like that option because if I change my mind at some point in time, I can just use the gear wheel to step back and amend my choice. However, if we look at the formula bar, this means that this expression now contains all the column names from the file. And that might cause trouble with other files in that folder. So I'm going to X that out, and I'm going to select column 1, and instead of choose columns, I'm now going to remove it. So I right-clicked the header and selected remove. So if you've seen the previous video, you'll know that what we're going to do next is we're going to flip this table on its side, because we want to fill in these gaps. So on the Transform tab, we'll select transpose. And this is where it becomes challenging, because I can select all the columns containing dates, right click the header and select fill down. But as you can see, again, all the column headers are named. So if there is a varying length, a varying number of rows in each week, then that will mean that the result won't be in column 8 or column 17 or column 24. So this is something that we'll have to solve at a later stage. So I'm also going to X this step out. Okay. Now, we have already seen that each new table, actually starts with a column containing dates. So if you have column 1 through column 7, if that is a separate table, and column 8 through 13, I believe. Oh no, let's see, through column 16, yep. That would be a separate table if they were all separated, these tables that are now kind of stitched together, and we could just append them and perform some basic operations to get that back into a proper tabular format. Now, what we did in the previous example was to add a manual step, and we're also going to do that now. So we're going to enter a manual step by pressing F(x) here in the formula bar, and we're going to say Table.ToColumns. Now this will split up our table in a list containing lists. So each column in this table will become a list in a list. So let's see what that looks like. Press enter. And there you have it. So this is column 1, this is column 2, and so on. I'm going to turn this into a table. And we're going to add an index number. So add an index number, you can choose from 0 or from 1, that really doesn't matter. Okay. Now we still have those gaps in the dates, so let me make this a bit bigger. We still need to fill this down. But there's a catch. There is no fill down operation for a list. There is only a fill down operation, or M expression, for tables. So we somehow have to turn this list into a table. Then we can perform that fill down operation. And then we can move on with the other steps. So how are we going to turn this into a table? Well, we have that index number. So by using a group by operation, and let me just hold off, I'm going to select our index column first, group by index, that's fine. Notice that our lists are placed inside column 1. Okay. So this created a count column. Now I'm going to rename this. I'm going to say to table. So it's going to rename this column from count to table. And here we're going to say table from columns. Now the underscore is an access operator for each record. So that is fine. We're just going to have to point to where our lists were placed, and that was inside column 1. So, column 1. Okay, and that is going to return a type table. Oh, not a type. Excellent. And I'm going to press enter. So when I click off to the side here in the white space, you can now see that our list is now turned into a table with only one column. And that is done for every list. So that means we now can perform that fill down operation for each table containing dates. So we're going to add a custom column. I'm going to give this another name as well. I'm going to call this fill down. Okay. So what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to access this table, access the first column of this table. Remember, there is only one column, and then access the first value of that column. So if, and to access the table, we'll only have to reference the column that holds that table. Now we have to name the column that we want to reference, so that's column number 1. And now we have to, because one column from a table is in fact a list, we can now use our position index number, so those curly brackets with a null between them, to retrieve the first value from that list. Okay? And once we have that, we want to check if that is a date. So is date. And if it is a date, then we want to fill that column down. Okay, so then we're going to select table dot fill down. There it is. So table.fill down has 2 arguments. So the first thing it needs is a table, and the second is the columns as a list. Okay, so the table is our toTable, and as a list, our column name, and that was column 1. Okay, closing parentheses. Now, if that record does not contain a date, then we want to return the entire table that we already have. So I'm going to enter toTable by double clicking it. Okay. Now it says we didn't make any errors, so let's press OK. Excellent. So this table had our dates with the nulls, and this table is now perfectly filled down. Excellent. Now remember, when we did this in the previous video, we had to find where, at what column the dates were placed. So from that point we could split it up into a separate table. And to do that we need a list of columns. So we have to actually turn this back into a list. And to do so, all we need to do is reference that column number 1. So I'm going to copy that here from the formula bar. And after the table.fill down, after the closing parentheses, I'm going to request that column number 1. And I'm also going to reference that from our toTable. So from the table, I'm also going to request only column 1. And that should give us a list. Excellent. So, and now we have our lists with, and let's see where, yep, there we had it. Yep, next set of dates. Okay. So now we have to update our index, because we still have to turn these separate lists back into a table. And we know that the dividing place is where the position of the dates column is. So we're going to have to update our index column here. So again, we're going to add a custom column. Let's see, and we'll call this updated index or index 2. No, it doesn't matter. There we have it. And now we're going to check if our list contains dates. So we're going to select if this list, and we're going to only check what is on the first position of that list. If that is a date, then we want to return our index number, else we want a null. Press OK. Excellent. Now we're going to fill that down. So fill down. Perfect. And we can now group by index number 2. So everything with a 0 will become one table. So all these lists will be transformed back into a single table. And the same will happen for everything here with the index number 7. All these lists will be transformed back into a single table. So selecting column 2, press group by index number 2, that's fine. Oh, let me check whether we leave it. Our lists are in the column fill down. Okay, so just leave it as count. We're not going to count the rows. Again, we're going to choose a Table.From-Columns. There it is. Again, we're going to leave the access operator, and we're going to add the column that had our lists, and that was the column called fill down. And that will return a type table. Press enter. Excellent. Again, clicking off into the white space here to see a preview of that table, and this is looking pretty good. Excellent. So now we have to append all these separate tables together into a single table. So again, just entering a manual step here, and we'll see a Table.Combine. The Table.Combine takes a list of tables, so we're going to have to reference the count column. Adding closing parentheses and press enter. Great. So now the last few steps, just select column 1, press down either Ctrl or Shift, and select transform, unpivot columns, unpivot other columns. Now we don't need that attribute column, so we're going to right click the header and select remove. We're going to change the name, so this is our date. And this is our movements. And this is our name. And we're also going to select the correct data types. So this is a type date, and these are type text. Great. So, as you can see, we updated the transformations to this transform sample file, and our query broke. So the result query broke. So if we step to that query, we can see that the column 1 of the table wasn't found. Well, actually none of these columns will be found. So I'm just going to X that change type step out, remove that, and this is looking pretty good. So it added the files here. Let me see. We also have, yep, we have file 1 and file 2. This is looking great. Now all we have to do here is again just update the data types, and we're all set. So select type date and select movements, press down Ctrl or Shift and select type text. All done. Perfect. Well, as you can see, this had a little more to it, but I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. And thank you for watching. All the best.